I'm Frans Kempen. Good evening. We are on the 4th of October, just before the start of the Bitcoin Wednesday here in Amsterdam. And this evening we have the honor to have Karl Kreder here in our event. And Karl, you are going to have an interesting demonstration about the Grid Plus solution you have. And Karl is Director of Energy at Consensys in the US. And we're going to talk about Grid Plus and your smart energy agent. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Welcome. So first to start, Karl, maybe something about your background, what you've done before accepting this job, and also about Consensys. What's the role of Consensys? What's the organization? What's it doing? And how does it fit in the energy market?
Okay, so my background in cryptocurrencies goes back to about 2012 timeframe, where I just heard about Bitcoin, got interested, bought some, started trading some, alternate coins, and that went on through sort of my PhD, and that's what was sort of my intro to blockchain. In terms of my background outside of cryptocurrencies, I'm an engineer by training. I worked for a place called Southwest Research after getting my bachelor's degree. And I started something called the Energy Storage System Evaluation and Safety Consortium. So that happened roughly 2010 timeframe. And what that was a consortium doing pre-competitive testing on large format lithium-ion batteries for transportation and storage applications. Okay. So that was kind of my intro into the world of energy.
The energy market, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
After doing that, I went back to school and I got my doctorate in material science, looking at advanced battery materials. While I was in school, I met someone called Alex Miller, and he's a co-founder of Grid Plus. I introduced him to cryptocurrencies, and he ended up graduating with a master's degree in computational physics, and ended up getting a job eventually as a developer at Consensys. Okay. And then so he was working on what we call an enterprise consulting project with one of the largest energy companies in the world, essentially networking a swarm of smart batteries so that they could buy, sell, and sort of arbitrage energy over time. Okay. And so he brought me in as a subject matter expert to consult with Consensys. And then I kind of got hooked. I went to a conference, and the interesting thing when I went to the conference, it was one of these blockchain conferences. Since 2012, up to that point, Bitcoin and blockchain had been a relatively sort of fringe business. Yeah. It hadn't had this sort of mainstream adoption. And as I was working on my PhD, people started talking about blockchain. But when I went to that conference, it was interesting because you met all of these people from all of these major corporations in every industry. Yeah. And they were all, you could see the gleam in their eye because they were like, we understand blockchain is here, we kind of get what's going on, and we understand it's going to disrupt our business. And that just 100% sold me that this is something that I should dedicate my efforts to full time.
And at that time, the world was small, right? In terms of people who are familiar with the blockchain technology and the cryptos, etc. So it's quite, you could see the entire community there, I suppose.
Yeah, so then I decided, okay, I should join Consensys and start working on this full time. And eventually we conceived of the idea of doing a spin-out company, or what we call a spoke, which was Grid Plus. And the idea of Grid Plus essentially came from was informed by a number of what we call enterprise consulting projects that we were doing with the different energy companies, utilities, many of which were focused on this idea of sort of peer-to-peer trading. But the issue with peer-to-peer trading that we found is that although Ethereum and blockchain can sort of scale to enable it, the penetration of distributed energy resources, or solar panels and batteries, wasn't sufficient to basically take this to scale. So we stepped back and we said, well, what value can blockchain bring to electricity markets today?
Yeah, and who is we?
Oh, so Mark D'Agostino, Alex Miller, and myself are the three co-founders of Grid Plus, and we had worked together on the battery, this form of smart battery projects.
And was it still then a part of Consensys, or is it really spin off?
Because every time you move, it bumps against you. So
okay.
I hear a thump.
Oh, sorry.
I'm just gonna touch it on this.
Do we need to do something over? Or?
No. It's just that every time he comes, it touches his own
That's
jacket.
good.
You hear.
Oh, okay.
It's good that you notice. Yeah.
Sorry about that.
Yep.
Good to go.
So it was a fully part of Consensys Grid Plus, or did you spin off, be a separate company, or how does it?
Yeah. So initially, Grid Plus was part of Consensys. It still technically is part of Consensys. We're in the process of spinning out at the moment.
Okay.
So we've incorporated in Delaware as our own company, and we're in the process of doing a token sale.
And what time frame?
We've finished our pre-sale, and we're doing the public token sale the end of October.
Okay. Yeah. And the team, how big is the team? How much developers do you have?
Yeah, so our full-time team, so within Consensys, there's about 320 employees.
Sorry?
Inside of Consensys, we have about 320 employees around the world, about half of which are located in Brooklyn. In terms of Grid Plus, we have 8 full-time employees at the moment and 7 advisors, but we also draw pretty massively on the resources within Consensys. So, legal, marketing, all of that stuff is sort of provided through what we call the mesh of Consensys.
Okay.
So as we're going forward, that team obviously is going to scale quite a bit. We'll probably anticipate at least tripling the size within the next couple of months.
Wow, okay. That's ambitious. In the next few months. Yeah, after the ICO, you get funding, you can source more people and grow faster, I suppose.
Yeah. So we have essentially a proof of concept of the system using a virtualized smart energy agent and sort of the Ethereum testnet to show kind of how the system will work. Yeah. The issue is we have to take sort of that proof of concept and put it into a producible production level manifestation. So
maybe it's good to explain, let's say, what your solution is. What are you going to launch?
Right. Yeah. So Grid Plus, in a very short form, is the world's first blockchain-based retail electricity provider or utility. And all of our customers are going to be able to buy, sell, and settle their energy use in real time using the blockchain.
And using also cryptocurrency, or?
So we're building on the Ethereum blockchain. There's going to be a couple options for the customers. If they're cryptocurrency familiar and they want to, they can settle using Ethereum. If not, we're also offering the option, which we expect to be the predominant option initially, of using what we call a Bolt, which is a USD stable token that we're creating. So it's essentially, so essentially, for somebody that doesn't want to use Ethereum, they'll send us money via, say, an ACH payment. We then put that in a segregated cash account and create a corresponding number of ERC20 tokens.
Yeah, one-to-one.
One-to-one, called a Bolt. So it's 100% backed, and it's actually a regulated thing. So within Texas, if you're a retail electricity provider and you take a customer deposit, it has to exist in an insured segregated cash account. Sure. Yeah. So it exists there, and then the Bolt is essentially kind of like an accounting layer that's used. It allows us to have the benefits of blockchain without necessarily having everybody be aware or need to know anything about cryptocurrencies to use it.
But people can use also without the Bolt. Just with regular fiat currency payment, with dollars?
No, so it's going to either be the Bolt, which they'll see as a fiat currency payment. To them, it'll be transparent. They'll just see, okay, I gave them $200, I have $200 of credits in my account.
Just for settlement in the network.
Ideally, if you want to be the most sort of efficient with the topology, it's best done just using Ethereum. But the Bolt is kind of this interim solution from today when you have a couple thousand people or tens of thousands of people in Texas that might be willing to settle their electricity bills in Ethereum to hopefully a couple of years from now when everybody's going to...
Much more. And you mentioned Texas a few times. So is Texas your test ground? Or
so Texas is going to be our first market. The reason that we've chosen Texas is a couple of things. One is the regulatory environment allows us to fit in to the existing regulations. Number two is it's a competitive, deregulated market. So that means you can come in as a retail energy provider and start bringing in customers. Three is that it has 100% smart meter penetration. Yeah. And then four, if you look at the price structure of the market right now, the retailer is significantly inefficient relative to the actual cost of energy and distribution. So
there's a healthy margin in between for you to take advantage of.
Yeah, so it's interesting. The margin for, or the profitability of traditional retailers is actually relatively low, but they spend a tremendous amount of their money on non-value-added services. Okay. And so we're trying to remove those non-value-added services out of the cost structure. Yeah. And we think we can lower the price of residential electricity anywhere from 35 to 40%.
Wow, that's a lot. So if I'm a consumer, I'm a resident in Texas, what do I need to do to buy the Agent Plus, and what can I do with it?
Yeah, so if you're a resident of Texas, you will be able to sign up for Grid Plus. You're going to buy the agent. We think the cost is maybe around $50 to start. Essentially what that is just a box that you plug in, and then you'll also have a smartphone app. And so with the smartphone app, you can manage your account balances. You can top up your account. What the agent is two things. I guess first and foremost, it is a secure hardware enclave and a secure computing environment to enable the secure use of cryptocurrencies or blockchain-based assets by naive customers that have no understanding of blockchain or security. And the smartphone app is kind of one of the software pieces. So the security topology essentially is what we call 2 of 3 blind key multi-signature security. And so what that is there's a key on a smartphone, there's a key that exists in the smart energy agent, and then there's a key that we have with Grid Plus. And so what that does is the customer has control of their funds, but we've eliminated essentially any single point software attack vectors, hardware attack vectors, physical attack vectors, while also having them maintain their funds. And then we've also delocalized keys such that there's no single point of failure or loss.
Okay, so the agent is also kind of hardware wallet?
Yeah. So
can I see it like this?
Yeah, it's kind of like a hardware wallet. The principal difference is most hardware wallets maintain security by going offline. Yeah. For our business model, it's online 24/7, 365.
Right? Yeah, to measure. Yeah. So on Grid Plus, what does it do in a household?
Yeah, so what it does is it basically reads the smart meter, and every 15 minutes it creates a payment to Grid Plus for the amount of energy that they've used over the 15 minutes. So that's the mechanism for doing real-time settlement. What it also does is it acts as the smart energy agent, and the smart energy agent is able to understand customer behavior patterns and predict their use, and then intelligently buy and sell energy out of either the day-ahead markets or the real-time markets.
And this is what you do, basically. You're sourcing the energy from the best supplier towards the resident? Or?
Yeah, well, so it's actually out of the market. So in Texas, you have these robust liquid markets that are run by the managing sort of authority, which is called ERCOT. And they're the ones that essentially set the markets up between the market participants. So the day-ahead markets and the real-time markets are markets where you either buy a contract for energy delivery a day before you're going to actually use it, and then the real-time markets are markets where you buy energy at essentially the spot price in the 15-minute increment that you are using it. Yeah. So the ideal situation is if you know your energy consumption perfectly or well, you would rather make a prediction of what you're going to use tomorrow and then buy the majority of that energy out of the day-ahead market, because it will typically give you, if not a lower price, certainly less volatile price.
Exactly.
So on a sort of average basis, you're going to do better the more energy you can buy out of the day-ahead market. Yeah. So the agent essentially tries to learn the patterns of the consumer and then decides how much energy to buy out of day-ahead markets or real-time markets.
Okay.
The interesting thing there is that in and of itself is already sort of a value-added service for the grid, because if I'm a retail electricity provider and I'm using normal sort of hedging and buying strategies, I'm trying to predict the aggregate demand of my entire customer base.
And now you can customize.
I can do it
resident.
specifically per person, and I can get more data. So via the smartphone app, the customer can optionally provide their agent in a secure, encrypted way, their GPS location and say their calendar data, and then the agent can interpret that and use that data to help make better predictions on how to buy and sell energy. A next step after that is you can say add a Nest thermostat to your home, and then the agent can control one of your biggest loads, and it can do it based off your preferences as well as the current market prices. And then over time you can add sort of more distributed energy resources or responsive assets, and you can just keep increasing the...
Exactly. Once you are in the household in a meter locker with a smart agent, you can measure a lot of items, right? So
and then you can control them intelligently too.
Exactly.
So like another example would be
with consent of the resident, right?
Absolutely. So I mean, they'll have to set up the interface with the agent, so it's 100% under their control. But like another example could be if you have a Tesla, right? Many people like to talk about this idea of V to G, so vehicle to grid, where the vehicle could either charge from the grid but also put energy back on the grid. And that's actually a difficult topology, but a very simple topology is what if I can just have my Tesla intelligently charge from the grid? So instead of coming home and plugging in my Tesla and having it charge at 7 when prices are peaking, demand's the highest, congestion's the highest, the smart energy agent can say, well, actually energy is most expensive now, which means it's in the least supply. So if you wait till, say, 2 a.m. in Texas, you can charge for the lowest price, and you'll also be charging on probably 100% wind production.
Exactly.
So it's
nice that you make this example, because in Holland we have now Tennet, which is the provider for energy in Holland who balances demand and supply of energy, and we have a blockchain-based case with that energy provider for the Teslas, who will be loaded when the price is low and be giving electricity to the network when the price is high.
Right.
So that's some intelligence in the system.
Yeah.
And we do this test now in a proof of concept way. But maybe to come back, so you have the resident with the agent in this house.
Right.
And the agent sees what's happening in the house in terms of energy consumption and manages, let's say, the supply of energy smartly. And you're in between the resident and, let's say, the energy market, basically.
Right.
Yeah. So what is the normal price which the consumer in Texas is paying for electricity or energy, and what is the price you are possibly to offer them?
Yeah. So if you look at the wholesale price of electricity plus the distribution cost, that can be anywhere from 5.5 to 6 cents in Texas. The price that the average or traditional retail electricity provider would charge a residential customer, somewhere in the neighborhood of 10.5 or 11.
Okay, so double.
Yeah, so it's almost double, and we think we can lower that total cost to the consumer by 35 to 40%.
Wow, that's a huge, interesting offer for a consumer, right?
Yeah.
Does he need to pay also the agent?
Yeah. So
or buy the agent, I mean, or?
Yeah. So right now we haven't decided if we're going to subsidize or if that's going to be an initial outlay cost for the consumer. Our target is for the production agent initially to be about $50. And over time with scale, we think we could drive that as low as, say, 20 or 25.
Yeah. Well, for the day-to-day consumption, it's at least you're far have a better price than the other competitors as the retailers, right? Yeah.
So I mean, in Texas, we have high usage on average because we have very hot summers. We have to use a lot of air conditioning. So in the summer times, it's not atypical to have an average house have an electricity bill in the hundreds of dollars. So
how much does it save when they have the agent of grid?
Well, like I said, it's about 35 to 40%.
And it's in absolute value per year?
Yeah.
In dollars?
Yeah. So that would be kind of over the year.
Okay.
And obviously how much you save is dependent upon what your your production is, because there's also like some
Sure.
fixed cost, or not your production, your consumption is also your production if you have a solar panel. But it's difficult to say for any single person. But if you're just a basic consumer and you're just consuming, it should be about 35.
So these are exciting times for you, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you developed with Grid Plus the smart agent, developing a POC and beyond that, doing an ICO in the next few weeks, launching it then in Texas with a very interesting business case for the residents. I hear already people starting here in the hall. We need to go to the speaker corner for your presentation, so we need more or less to close off. Are there any questions I did not pose to you, which you would like to voice here?
So there was one thing that I just want to kind of cover briefly that I think is really, really interesting, and that is that if you look at trying to use cryptocurrencies or blockchain-based assets, there hasn't been a situation where we've been able to do it in a way that you have a naive user using it in an abstracted way where they actually still have possession of their funds. So the system that we're creating with Grid Plus and with the Smart Energy Agent, I think is going to be the first sort of situation where that happens. So we don't only see this as an energy business, but we also see it as putting the infrastructure in place for widespread adoption of cryptocurrencies.
Yeah. Everybody has a wallet then in the house, right?
Everybody has a wallet,
so
and they have an app where they can originate transactions. They can have their hardware enclave be the second signature for it, but that's also kind of like a bank. So it'll have physical authentication via a PIN. So if you have, say, a larger transaction, you could originate it on your smartphone and then use the PIN on your agent as the second factor before it signs and broadcasts the transaction. So in some ways, it's kind of like in-home crypto banking. In other ways, in the future, the other interesting piece is we're actually using something called a state channel. So instead of having every transaction go over the Ethereum blockchain, we'll essentially open a state channel every 4, 6, 8 weeks or so with the customer. All the transactions that happen while that state channel are open are essentially free. So and that cost of opening and closing state channel is only like 20 cents. So we can operate with Ethereum with sort of the limitations of transactions per second in a very, very efficient way. But the interesting thing about it is if you have Grid Plus as a hub and all of the different consumers as a spoke who now have access and availability to this simple system to use cryptocurrencies, they could actually start sending each other payments through Grid Plus using the state channel. So not only have you created like crypto banking, you've also created a Visa network of some form.
Exactly.
Right. So there's a number
peer-to-peer payment network.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it's a very interesting thing. Another example is because we're this always online sort of gateway device, instead of just being an energy specific device, it could be a generalized device for IoT. So as we progress forward, we're planning on developing an API as we move down the road. And that would essentially be open to everybody such that they can have a very light implementation of something on a standard piece of hardware using standard software where they just set up a trust connection via, say, simple RSA signature with the agent. Then the account and permissioning is an amount, and the keys are all dealt with by the agent, but it can be the gateway for every other IoT device to use crypto.
I see many use cases in the future coming up, right?
Yeah. So if you start sort of thinking about this, like we see this as like a critical infrastructural piece for distributed ledger technologies, generally for blockchain, for Web 3.0.
So my last question is, when are you going to launch this concept in the Netherlands? I mean, really, so let's shake up the energy market here as well with your solution.
Yeah, so unfortunately in the Netherlands, you guys already have really, really cheap energy and you have very thin margins.
A lot of wind.
You do have a lot of wind, though.
Not so much sun, but still.
Yeah, so one of our other things is we're creating partnerships with some utilities. One of those will hopefully be announced here in the next week or so. But we're basically working with them to, as we're developing the production version of our agent, to sort of get their input on it, with the aim of, once we've proven the model out in Texas, say hopefully by the end of 2018 at scale, they would be looking to license that as a product offering in their local market. So that's.
Can you mention the name of the energy provider already?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay.
It's one of the larger ones in the world, though. So it's an interesting.
It's really good to see you here, Karl. I'm very looking forward to your speech here at the audience at the Bitcoin Wednesday. Thanks very much for your interview, and good luck with Grid Plus.
Appreciate it. Thanks.